joining us here for the EMSC Fan Webinar Series, Webinar 1 for 2019 to 2020. And this webinar will be on the EMSC 2019 Showcase, a couple of great posters put together with fan representatives. We're going to talk about some of the facilitators and successes and barriers and lessons learned in conducting research and putting together posters for featuring at conferences. It's going to be a really great session, and I'm excited that you all are joining us. My name is Sarah Lipsey from Atlas Research, and I'm going to be moderating today. So first off, just a couple of technical notes. We are using Adobe Connect. As you can see, you're here in the Adobe Connect session with us. We have an audio number, and you can also participate through your computer. When you are participating, please mute your phones and your computer microphones when you're not speaking to decrease background feedback. When we have question and answer sessions, we are happy to have you ask your question out loud on the phone line, or if you'd rather, you can also use the chat box function, which is on your lower right-hand side, to type in questions, and I will read those out for our speakers. You can make the slides larger if you wish. There is a button in the upper section of the main screen that looks like 4 arrows going away from each other that will expand the slides, and you can hit a similar looking button again to go back to the normal view that you're seeing right now. So our agenda today is pretty straightforward. We've got some welcome and introductions. We're going to go into 2 presentations for the 2019 EMSC Showcase, and then we'll move into next steps and questions. So I just want to give a really quick overview of some of the folks who are working on the EMSC fan activities. We have our fan activities planning team here. With members from HRSA, from the Emergency Medical Services for Children program, from EAIC, and from Atlas Research. We have our map of our great fan representatives across the states and territories. If you do not see your name here, please reach out to Cassidy Penn at the EAIC, and we'll make sure we include you on this and on our fan mailing list so you know what's coming up in the future. We'd like to give a special thanks to our fan steering committee members for helping us put together events like this and think up great topics and speakers. All right, at this point, I am going to turn it over to our 2 speakers today. We have 2 speakers, and they're both going to talk about some posters and research that they put together recently, how they did it, some background, some of the lessons learned along the way. Our first speaker is going to be Lori Warnock. Lori, please.
Hi there. This is Lori Warnock, fan rep from New Hampshire. In my secret identity, my superhero identity, I'm also the education coordinator for New Hampshire for the Northern New England Poison Center. I am known as the face of poison in New Hampshire, because as the only employee here in New Hampshire, the Poison Center is actually located at Maine Medical Center in Portland and covers Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont. So my job is to travel from side to side, north to south in the state of New Hampshire and do basically prevention education. And for the past 2.5 years, the prevalent topic has been vaping. Electronic cigarettes, electronic nicotine delivery devices, if you work in public health. We are the only people who actually call them that. Everyone else calls them vapes or Juuls or Sorin or drops or whatever. And so the schools in New Hampshire in particular have gone really berserk with the experience of having to deal with kids who are vaping. And so as a result, they've been looking desperately for education and have not been able to find too many resources. So there are 2 groups in New Hampshire that have been doing it, predominantly me and a group called Breathe New Hampshire, which has for a long time worked on respiratory health issues. And between the 2 groups, we have pretty much divided up the state. for the state of New Hampshire, most recent data identified that we are, in fact, we have the highest rate of vaping among high school students in the country, another dubious honor. And unfortunately, our schools are faced with a lack of guidance with respect to education programs, prevention programs, guidance on disciplinary procedures. The disciplinary procedures are across the board. They go from 1-day suspension to 10-day suspension to a citation from the school resource officer along with a fine for possessing contraband. And so my job was to structure an education program that would inform, at first, adults about these products and the concerns, and then after, we were asked to talk with students as well. And there was very little information out there because it's a new product. There's very little peer-reviewed journal articles, very little research, peer-reviewed research available. So part of my job, strangely enough, is to go to vape shops and poke around a little bit and become familiar with the different products and the terminology. Part of my job is to talk with teens about what they're seeing and why they're using it, and then it's tracking down the same kind of information that most of us use when we're trying to create any kind of presentation, that is valid research. There's, as I mentioned, very little traditional scientific research, which means you do a lot of poking around on sites like the Weed Blog and Leafly and High Times Magazine to learn more about marijuana vaping. And you spend a lot of time on Pinterest looking at pictures of vape devices and cruising online vape shops and then erasing your browser history so that your 16-year-old daughter doesn't poke around in the same places where I've poked around. In 2018, I did 52 presentations, and I tallied up over 10,000 students and adults. My poster shows through August 35 presentations. I wrapped up the year with 70 presentations this year on e-cigarettes. And some of those days would be, I would show up at a high school, I would do 2 or 3 presentations for the student body, stay after school and do a presentation for faculty, and then come back after 6 to do a presentation for parents. And that meant 2 different presentations. One, with students, I target the marketing and how they've been sold an idea of this product as safe and harmless that is not necessarily safe or harmless. And I talk about the addictive nature of it, hoping that the idea that they're giving up control will be pretty motivating for them. And with parents, I do a lot of show and tell. I bring products with me. I bring juices with me. I let them smell and hold them and take things apart. And then I show lots of photographs of the devices so that they can recognize them because they take a lot of different forms and parents don't know what to look for. It's hard to evaluate because I can't survey the students directly. That's not considered kosher. So I often will follow up my presentations with a quick 6 or 7 questionnaire, a SurveyMonkey type link for the educators who observed the presentation to see what they got out of it, if they got any feedback from their students about the presentation, and if they, as professional educators, felt that it was appropriate content for the age of the students that I presented to. The adult presentations, I do try to follow up, again, with a SurveyMonkey link to sort of gather what other information I can from them. The information I have presented on my poster also focuses on some information that one study actually did gather in talking with focus groups about the most effective messaging for teens and explaining to them that what they're vaping is not just water vapor, that it has chemicals in it, aside from nicotine and what the potential dangers are, that there's been very deceptive target marketing, and that they are relinquishing control, that they are donating their bodies to science for the benefit of these companies that are making money off them. Those messages seem to be the most effective, and so that's what I've sort of worked into my presentation. Moving on to the next slide. The stakeholders and collaborators, we've actually developed a working group in the state, including the agencies that are listed on the slide, Breathe New Hampshire, as I mentioned, the primary partner, but also the Department of Health and Human Services Tobacco Prevention and Cessation Program. They're actually promoting a student-based app, an evidence-based phone app called My Life, My Quit, to help students who want to quit vaping. And it is a specifically designed app for students, again, a phone app being much more popular means of attracting students to something, and specifically about vaping, because so many of the materials that they have already are targeted toward adults and are about traditional combustible cigarettes. So this is a specific project that is a little bit more focused. The Bureau of Drug and Alcohol Services, because of the concerns about marijuana. New Hampshire is a medical marijuana state, but we do not have recreational marijuana. The Department of Education, as I mentioned, they're looking for material to provide to school systems with as guidance for both restorative justice programs, disciplinary processes, et cetera. And the partners around the communities are substance misuse prevention and DFC community agencies, so the grassroots organizations that are doing the prevention work in each community. And invariably, one presentation leads to 2 or 3 more, because the school nurse will come to a school nurse conference, hear me speak, and then decide she'd really love to have me come to her high school. Or she'll talk to another school nurse who will say, oh yeah, I could really use a presentation. We've been looking for someone. So it's been largely word of mouth. Going to the next slide, my presentations to adults, I think, are effective. Those, the feedback that I get does convince me that they have learned a lot, that they understand what the particular dangers are about this product, what the uncertainties, the unknowns are about this product, and why teens are at greater risk than adults. The challenge, as I said, is getting evaluation as to what impact it's had on the students. And we know that they listen to peer educators much more concretely than listen to adults. So we do work with some of the leading peer education groups in our state. Dover Youth to Youth has been, they've actually piloted an education program that they've been doing training across the country on with other peer education groups. And Empower Youth in the Manchester area, our largest city, we've done a train the trainer with them 2 or 3 years in a row now. And then they send teams out to go do prevention education on the topic. Sustainability, the nice piece for me is that I'm funded by federal grant money, the Poison Center. So my role as an educator is fairly secure. My job is to identify the emerging topics and then develop material on it. Unfortunately, on this particular topic, the horse is out of the barn. The prevention education that we're trying to do is at the middle school level and somewhat at the elementary school level, because we're seeing increasing numbers in the middle school. For the 4 million teens across the country that are now actively using e-cigarettes, and many of whom are addicted to nicotine, it's going to be a challenge for them. And so it'll be interesting to see what tools are developed to help them, because even if we confiscate all these devices, we still have to deal with the fact that we have all these kids that are addicted. So, so with respect to sustainability for my work, I'm pretty secure, and as long as they keep calling me and asking me to come and do presentations, I will have to keep updating this to reflect all the new information that seems to come out weekly. So, back to you, Sarah. Any questions?
Lori, thank you so much. I'd like to invite folks on the phone to, if you would prefer, to ask any questions of Lori out loud. You can also type any questions into the chat box on the lower right-hand side. I'm going to pause. Are there any questions on the phone immediately? I see there's some typing in the chat box, so I'm going to start off with a question. You mentioned that you are working with some peer educators to reach the youth audience. how have you built relationships with those peer educators? And when you're working with peer educators, what is your role?
So as I mentioned, we have this network of substance misuse prevention coordinators. I sit on the board of one of the larger agencies in the state, and I previously sat on the board of an umbrella agency that served all of the substance misuse prevention coordinators, SMPs. So I had sort of that larger access to them through quarterly meetings, et cetera. So I know many of them sort of face-to-face. And we had worked together early on in the opioid epidemic that New Hampshire is struggling with. So we'd had those sort of connections. When it came time to talk about e-cigarettes and when we saw that this was a younger demographic that we needed to be concerned with, it was a matter of doing a presentation for the peer educators and then sitting down and talking with them about which pieces of the message they thought would be most effective with their peers, and then helping them. They would craft their presentations themselves. My job was just to vet the information to make sure it was accurate and provide them with whatever data, et cetera, that I had. They actually, they have a film contest, a statewide film contest that they then show the products of the different youth groups at a regular movie theater that donates a night to them. They do a red carpet. They have an MC who interviews the different teams between showing their short videos. It's a lovely group to work with because they're so motivated. They're learning to polish their professional sort of presentation skills. They'll occasionally organize a panel discussion at their school, and they'll ask me and some of the other team members to come and sit in, usually ask local law enforcement, their SRO guidance from their school to sort of sit on a panel discussion and talk about this. So it varies area to area, but having done the background work with the grassroots agencies and the prevention agencies, it gave me a good entry point.
Great, that's really helpful. I'm going to pause again. Are there any questions on the phone? Lori, another question I had was you mentioned that evaluation is a challenge, particularly because you can't survey the students that you're talking to, that you're giving these presentations to. What kind of feedback have you gotten from the parents and educators that you've been able to survey?
Well, the parents are usually horrified, and I can't blame them because for some of them, they know their kids are vaping. In fact, in my own community, I sometimes get a text message from a parent saying, how do I get my kid to stop vaping? And the first question I have to ask them is, does your child want to stop vaping? And if the answer is no, then I have to sort of remind them that it takes adults on average 8 to 10 tries to quit smoking traditional cigarettes, and that's with the help of things like patches and gums and medications, many of which can't be used for adolescents. We have plenty of adolescents who are adult-sized, but then you have those younger ones that haven't gone through puberty yet and still have the metabolism of a rabbit. The pediatricians are not eager to prescribe an adult patch, for example, for that child. So it can be, they're left with sort of the traditional behavior modification, which we know is the least successful means of quitting smoking. So here we have people who don't have fully developed executive function, don't have fully developed impulse control, and we're expecting them to use the least effective means to quit a habit that is threatening their health. So for parents, they always want to know, well, what can I do? And I try to present whatever we've got in the way of the best resources. So Stanford School of Medicine has a great educational material, packet of educational materials, both for parents and for educators. It's a 5-module curriculum that includes a Cahoots game and a 2 truths and a lie. So the type of tools that kids are familiar with using in school that actually enjoy using for reinforcing messaging. My Life, My Quit is part of a larger quit smoking format. And so quitsmoking.gov, quitsmokingnh, I use whatever resources we have available. For the teachers, they're just exasperated because kids will vape in class. And, the devices don't issue those giant clouds that you so often see when you pull up at a stoplight and someone rolls down the window and Mount Vesuvius comes out the window and it smells like French toast. Most of the kids aren't using that type of device. They're using devices that create much smaller clouds. So the teacher will turn to the whiteboard and the kids will vape in the middle of class. And since you can't tell where it came from, you're just left with the lingering air of mango hanging over the classroom. And so they're quite exasperated. And when kids have to go without, the behavioral issues that come with nicotine withdrawal, anxiety and depression and insomnia and irritability and all of those things just can certainly be a challenge for the teachers as well. So they're all looking for ways to help their students, but right now there really isn't a lot out there. Unfortunately, my job has been more to educate, not to assist them in solving the problem, and that's one of the big drawbacks.
Right. Well, thank you so much. If there are no other questions on the phone or the chat box, I will go ahead and move to our next presenter. But if you think of any other questions for Lori or for both of our presenters, we'll have some more time for Q&A at the end of today's discussion, and you can also enter questions into the chat box at any point, and I'll see them and read them. So again,
Sarah,
Lori, thank you so much.
Let me just say, you're welcome. If, my contact information is all there. If anyone's interested in the materials that I use as my resource list, we have created a statewide resource list that has national resources, et cetera, on it. Shoot me an email and be happy to share that information with anyone that's interested.
Perfect. So I'm going to turn it over now to our second speaker today, Mary Ellen Wilson. Mary Ellen?
Good afternoon. My name is Mary Ellen Wilson. I'm the family rep from Maryland, and I'm also a pediatric emergency department nurse at Johns Hopkins in Baltimore. Our poster describes a program that we've developed to help educate families about emergency departments and EMS visits. The idea came from actually a social media post in my community group where family members would post, my child needs to go to the hospital, which one is a good emergency department for children, and various people would post their comments regarding the facilities. This one's nice, this one's good, don't go there. And so it made me think as a family member and consumer that our families may not understand what pediatric emergency departments are available in our state. Some of our hospitals don't have pediatric facilities, and how we can better educate them. So as a state, we've been working on our Pediatric Ready program and educating EMS providers and working with our pediatric emergency departments and other hospitals, but the consumer wasn't aware of this information. So our program was to help educate families about pediatric emergency ready hospitals and emergency departments. So we had two goals. One was to create the training so that we could provide to the families, but then we also wanted to create a pool of educators that would be able to take this information out to the community to reach those individuals that would find it most helpful. Our Family Advisory Council met and we came up with some ideas on how to prepare this information. We took a lot of it from the Right Care When It Counts program to come up with some ideas that the families can follow. I think one of the barriers when we were talking about developing this program and felt that the Pediatric Ready ED was important information, that families really needed something that they could take away from it. And so that's why we tried to incorporate things that they could do in an emergency. We have a PowerPoint presentation that contains Train the Trainer slides, and we talk a little bit about knowing your audience, who you want to educate, and then the slides that are available for your presentation. I've been able to give this presentation at fire conventions. I gave it to family members at a local firehouse. We've now given it to our pediatric champions across the state so that they can take this back to their community. And what we found interesting is that people will often have ideas about how they can take it to their department. One of the presentations, a member was talking about working in a retirement facility, our community, where children will come over the summer and spend a week or two with their grandparents, and how the grandparents often did not know the patient or the child's medical information or a detailed history. So it was being able to help those potential educators think about their target audience and how they could modify the training to them. One of the other activities that we did was create an emergency ready to go bag that contained comfort items that would help the child cope with that emergency department visit. At Johns Hopkins, we're lucky and to have Child Life, and we have a lot of resources available, but that may not be the same across the state. Or occasionally you'll have a child who has a specific pacifier need or a sippy cup request or certain type of pull-up that aren't available no matter where you go. So encouraging families to have a to-go bag. Did I advance that? Okay. So we did that as part of a hands-on activity. Sorry. We did that as part of a hands-on activity. One of the projects that we did when teaching our trainers, we gave them scenarios with patient ages and conditions and had them think about, as an EMS provider, what they may suggest to be in that to-go bag, and then also how to tailor their assessment to that age. So it was a great learning opportunity for our EMS providers as well. We had a budget of about $2,600 for this project. We created 30 sample bags that we used in training. And so part of our hands-on training for the trainers was for them to put a to-go bag together. So we bought supplies that each of them could take and put in their to-go bag and to be used as a sample in their training. We obtained a lot of our teaching materials from various sites on the internet, and so we would reproduce those materials that cost about $200. We did create a tabletop display and had a tablecloth that was printed with our family logo that we can use for other projects. And then we paid for staff to travel to do 4 Maryland trainings. So that was our budget. I mentioned that it was done at our local fire station first, and then we did it at EMS conferences and state fire conventions. We thought that this was a good audience who would be able to reach out to community members through risk reduction programs or other events. And we've repeated it so that we could try to get all of our champions involved. So we have the module now, it's available. We have the lecture notes, the PowerPoint, and all the handouts available on a shared drive. And each of the champions has a to-go kit that I mentioned through funding with the partnership grant. We've been getting feedback from our champions. They have requested that we develop a quick trifold or one-page advertisement or a way to draw families into their presentation. So we are currently working on that, as well as a promotional poster about the project. I think also one of our challenges when we were doing this is we had many ideas of what we could incorporate. We were adding in a tour of the back of a medic unit or a tour of the emergency department. So one of our projects was limiting the scope, which took us some time back and forth, but I feel like we've come up with a good balance. We do talk about family-centered care, so families know what to expect when they come to the emergency department. We talk about what happens when you call 911, who will respond. We talk about the type of assessment where the airway, breathing, and circulation will be checked, how it's important to tell everyone all your history. We do talk about our Maryland medical protocols so that we have evidence-based standardized care for our pediatric patients across the state. We talk about transport, whether it's by ground or air, and sometimes local or referring specialty care. And then we talk about when they get to the emergency department, what they can expect. And we give a couple samples of the PEDS ready questions so that they know when they go to an emergency department what they should expect to see in a PEDS ready department, such as the appropriate size blood pressure cuff for their child, for their baby, that all children should have a pain assessment and have appropriate tools, having a policy for family-centered care and promoting family-centered care in the ED where they're being seen. And then we give them the concrete steps on how they can be better prepared. We found that families appreciate this information, and we're hoping that we can continue to spread this information across the state. I see a couple of questions. Thank you for appreciating the.
It looks like we have a question from Tamara. Go ahead.
Yes, the elements of family-centered care we talk about. If the family chooses to be with the patient, that they should be offered that opportunity to have someone there to explain what's going on if they choose, and having the family involved in their care, that they should expect as a unit that they're taken care of as that family, and not, we'll take the child to the room, you wait out here, and we'll come get you when we're finished. We also talk about empowering the families, because I think sometimes they don't understand that it's okay to ask or to demand may be harsh, but what the expectation is that you will be allowed and you can ask these questions and continue to ask questions and advocate for your child. So we've been trying to include that information. Yeah, I thought the PEDS ready information was so important, especially as a pediatric emergency department nurse. We do a lot of work to prepare our emergency department to have this information, but making sure that families understood, because oftentimes it's meeting their expectations is what's important. And so when they expect and understand what will, what equipment or policies or supplies or treatment will be available, I think it helps to sometimes ease that burden. We also do other topics in the presentation, such as modeling behavior, and how the child will look to the parent, and so give them some concrete ways to say, this was a way to help your child stay calm. If you're upset and crying, your child may respond to that. So let us give you ideas. Let's play some music. Let's read a book. Let's look in your bag and see what's familiar to your child to help that child have something familiar in an unfamiliar environment. Are there any other questions?
Great. Are there?
I have included our contact information here. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me.
Mary Ellen, I have a question. You mentioned that you're going to be getting feedback from the champions on their use of the project at an upcoming meeting in January. What kind of feedback are you looking for, and how are you
Well,
collecting it?
we're hoping to do a paper survey or electronic survey. If we don't have the champions who are unable to obtain or who are unable to attend a meeting, but to find out if they did the presentation and approximately how many families were in attendance, just areas for improvement, challenges that they faced.
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit more about making this into a train the trainer program? What did that entail, making that conversion from the original program
We
to
really
train the
spent a
trainer?
lot of time on that because we were trying to duplicate the slides and the train the trainer. What we ended up doing was giving some basic information about family-centered care and pediatric emergency ready EDs, our Maryland Emergency Medical Services for Children Department, and Caring for Children, because we wanted our EMS providers to have that same level of understanding. We often may assume that EMS providers understand those terms, and so we felt like giving them that information and then talking about some characteristics and considerations, what may be helpful to them during this presentation. And some of the members who came and aren't comfortable public speaking were able to identify a partner. And so a partner who would be able to work with them, and the EMS provider could talk about the EMS system, and then the partner could talk about the ways the families can be prepared. So giving them those tools so that they can move forward with the project. We've also had some videos that...
Great. I see a question.
Okay. We have
go
developed
ahead.
videos in the state about calling 911 and the 10 ways that you can be better prepared for an emergency. So part of what we did through this was educating our EMS providers what resources are available for them as well.
Great. I see a question. Do you have parent leaders as the trainers, or are they all professionals?
Right now, they're all professionals, because that was our target audience to begin with, to pilot the program and move forward. And some of our professionals are parents. Some have special needs, children with special health care needs, and others are grandparents, and we felt that they were relatable to the community.
Great. Are there any other questions for Mary Ellen? You have a suggestion from Tamara. If you want parent leaders, I think Families
Okay.
they could probably
Thank
find
you.
some.
I think that's one of the other challenges is to have the time to do this. My full-time job is a nurse, and so trying to find the time to take this presentation and I think we have endless possibilities to move forward, and we're already seeing next steps that we can take in a project. But one of the challenges is really finding the time with, a full-time job. Trying to do a volunteer project can be challenging. So hopefully pairing up or partnering will help to ease that burden and spread the message.
Great.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much for that. So I think that we have actually got a third person on the phone who has some information on poster development and some lessons learned from putting together a poster and the research for it and presenting it. Dan Latham, are you on the phone with us?
Actually, I am. Thanks for having me. I apologize for getting on late. I evidently missed the email and ended up in my spam mail listening to Mary Ellen there. I also have a busy job as a nurse and running a company, a medical staffing company. So I totally missed my fan email. I apologize. So I don't have anything to present today like on here that you guys can see, but you did see the poster at the meeting. And so kind of had to back up a little bit from that because after creating the stickers and talking about it coming through, the reasons, you know, again, if you don't remember my poster, it was always ask the question, always question the response. And let's raise awareness that sometimes no response is a response. And the objective was to make decals or stickers available to every person who needs them through every school, nurse, first responder, law enforcement, healthcare, delivery organization, or department to raise awareness by placing them in a visible location, not like a tag on a child or something, but my own son who has special needs does not respond to EMS or emergency situations appropriately, so I didn't want to see him getting tased or shot, basically. And so after talking with several other parents that have special needs kiddos, it seems to be a common thought in our mind that that could happen. And then after meeting with several groups, I noticed that it was a big problem. And then also meeting with several law enforcement in our area where we live, in several of our counties, it seemed to be a huge question of theirs as also. So raising the awareness was something they definitely wanted someone to jump on, and I kind of saw the need for this. So I had to back up a little bit after our EMSC meeting because I started getting requests for them, and we were trying to design them to where other states could put their logo, their bear, on the stickers as well. But for our own state, we would have to kind of do more of a scaling project and look at this because all of a sudden after our on-site EMSC visit from the folks at HRSA and MEDARC and all of those, we kind of identified that there's a lot more to do than just what I can do. And so we're trying to look at maybe getting some regional folks, more fans, or fans of systems, or even more fans to help me in the state of Missouri that can accomplish our goals. We also recently, one of our larger university hospital systems kind of joined forces with the Special Olympics. And so we kind of thought that going through our scaling our project, we would look at those dates and events that are coming up in 2020 for our Special Olympics, law enforcement days, EMS days, where a lot of kiddos come out with their families and families bring out kids with special needs, and then also reach out to those groups that have get-togethers all the time that we don't usually know about. And then also, you know, talk about the stickers, bring some awareness, bring out the one-page handout for our Peds Ready initiative also in the state of Missouri, and just raise awareness and let families and caregivers know what Peds Ready means and what the hospitals are working toward, because we're working across the state with multiple hospitals and pediatric centers to all come together in one. So there was recently a board that was kind of created, and so we're moving slowly along. And I think that's pretty much all I know. I just have to kind of gather all the numbers and then go for funding and finding out where we can raise the money for the stickers or the tags.
Great, thank you. So Are there any questions on the phone for any questions on the phone for any of our speakers? I have one question that I'd like to close out with for all of you, Lori, Mary Ellen, and Dan. If somebody listening or watching this decided that they want to make a poster, they want to take a poster to a conference, present it, get this information out there, what would you recommend to them to be their first step? Lori, can I start with you?
Sure. There are many, many good templates out there to sort of guide you in organizing your information. My poster was not the kind of academic poster that I think most people think of when they think of a poster session. And if you've attended, I often go to the toxicology conferences, and the amount of information, the type of information, the statistical information that's presented in those is impressive. Mine was a bit more conversational because the nature of the project that I'm working on doesn't lend itself to a lot of data presentation. But there are lots of different templates out there for, depending on the type of information that you're presenting. And I think sometimes that can guide you in picking and choosing what you want to say and how you're going to display it.
Thank you. Mary Ellen, what would be your
recommendation? I agree with what Lori said, and I think often you have a lot of information that you want to put on there. I was trying to show some visuals with the posters or the PowerPoint slides, and so I had to step back sometimes and take things off so that it wasn't overwhelming, so that people could come up, still get the general idea of what the message I was trying to convey. It was still inviting, but not overwhelming. So trying to find that balance.
Great, makes sense. Dan, what would be your advice? And if you're talking, we can't hear you. You might be on mute.
Sorry, I was. I think pick a subject matter that you're passionate about and something that is going to have, a community-wide effect and change for EMSC kiddos and kiddos becoming adults. And so mine, of course, was centered around my own family. But then, like I said, I found out that it was way bigger than I was. And so I think that's very, very important to look at. And then as far as the presentation and stuff, I kept mine very simple, just displaying what I wanted to do, come up with, and, the questions. I'm always a big question guy. I like that question. And that's how I kind of, when I meet family in my own neighborhood, community, I ask them the question, where do you get care, or do you have struggles finding teams to help and stuff? Even with my own staff and my own company, just as an example, the other day I had a lady come in, and so I started asking her the questions, well, where do you take your kiddo to if it's a new onset of seizures and you're not dealing with this real well? And so it was asking the question so I could give her an answer, maybe relay her to the appropriate teams or get her the right information. So again, if you're going to do a poster, like Lori said, there's lots of great templates out there. And I think that just kind of keeping it simple and something that you're passionate about.
Great, thank you so much. Thanks so much, everyone, for putting together your presentations, for being willing to come on today, for answering our questions and being available. This has been really helpful and a great look at, first off, the great research that you conducted, and also some insight into how you conducted it, some of the stakeholders, some of the challenges and facilitators, and some of the keys to success for putting together some research that impacts EMSC and getting it out in front of people. Any parting thoughts from any of our speakers?
Just thank you for the opportunity to share.
Neat. So
Yes,
for next steps,
I would like to say
great,
that as
thank
well,
you.
and hope that we have a conference.
I hear you, Dan.
Yeah, and thank you, Sarah, for providing an easy format for us to sort of organize our presentations for that. Made things just simple.
Yes,
Great.
this is Cassie. Thank you to Alice for sure. You definitely coordinated wonderful meetings, so thank you.
Hey, thank you so much. So next steps, just keep an eye on your email for some more webinars. Topics still to be determined, but we got some dates for the next 3 webinars throughout the coming year. So just keep an eye on your email and you'll see upcoming topics and calendar invites for these. That is all we have today. Again, thank you to all of our speakers. Thank you to HRSA, to the Emergency Medical Services for Children program, and to EIC for all of your support, and all of the great FAN representatives that we have, and all the great state partnership managers. And I hope that everybody has a great holiday season.
Yeah, safe and happy holidays to everybody.
All right, bye.
Thank you all.